Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button if you guys are enjoying the content that we're throwing up. And make sure you guys hit the like button if you enjoy the video. And yeah, let's begin. Okay, so we are picking up with Annihilation Conquest. And I know I've been talking about doing the story for quite some time. Honestly, I just kind of want to cover it and just sort of have fun with it, right? Like, not really worried about view counts, just more worried about having a good time. And the cool thing about this is that Annihilation Conquest comes hot off the heels of Annihilation. And when I say hot off the heels, I mean, maybe it's been a couple months since Annihilation ended, if that. That's basically it, right? Now, for those of you guys who don't know about Annihilation, make sure you check the link in the description. That'll get you all the videos for Annihilation. You can kind of get caught up, but essentially that pushed the universe almost to the complete and total brink of destruction. And that's kind of what you have here, that in a lot of ways throughout the entirety of the universe, you kind of have these empires, right? You have the Kree, you have the Skrulls, you have the Shi'ar, you have like these these interplanetary empires that sort of rule these giant sections of the universe. And the result of that is that after the events of Annihilation, that like you have kind of what's essentially sort of a no man's land now. A lot of these territories that were previously being policed by the various empires are not being policed anymore because the resources just aren't there, right? Because so many lives were lost, so many militaries were decimated, different things along those lines. And so what you're met with are a handful of pirates who basically show up at a temple of the priests of Pama. And the idea is to basically just steal some stuff. The idea is just to loot. That's really all it is. So like loot some valuable artifacts and then sell them out to people. And that's really kind of the way things get done now. Unfortunately, this group is essentially met by the arrival of Phyla-Vell. Now, Phyla-Vell is a character that we have never really talked about here on Comics Explained. And Phyla-Vell is actually one of the coolest characters in the history of Marvel. She is amazing, right? Because for a lot of the modern readers who are basically reading, in like 2004, 2005, 2006, they kind of follow the introduction of her character going forward. So Phyla-Vell originally had her introduction in the second volume of Captain Marvel, and we're not talking about the one that applies to Carol Danvers. Instead, this version of Captain Marvel focuses on Genis-Vell. And the idea is that Genis-Vell is essentially the son of the original Captain Marvel, Mar-Vell of the Kree. The issue here is that Mar-Vell didn't really have Genis-Vell while he was alive. The idea was that Mar-Vell had fallen in love with an artificial being by the name of Elysius, who had actually been created as kind of a backup plan by Isaac when Thanos had basically screwed up Isaac's programming and so on. Kind of weird, doesn't really matter. The overall gist of this is that after Mar-Vell died, that Elysius had used some of Mar-Vell's DNA to artificially inseminate herself and then gave birth to Genis-Vell. The issue is that over the course of Captain Marvel Volume 5, the Genis-Vell was really kind of hit with this idea from Elysius that like he's essentially a poor man's Mar-Vell, right? He'll never be the man his father was, right? And so over the course of that story, Genis-Vell ends up going crazy. He ends up kind of destroying reality and then remaking it. And when that happens, Elysius ends up having Phyla-Vell, to really kind of combat Mar-Vell and replace him. And so once everything had gone back to normal, because this whole reality warping thing was not a huge crossover, it was strictly in the pages of Captain Marvel. So I wouldn't be surprised if you missed it. But once everything is set back to normal, Phyla-Vell is one of these characters that's kind of slipstreamed into the main Marvel universe, kind of brought in as everything's sort of collapsing, which Marvel's done that before, right? They did it with like Heroes Reborn, they did it with like Age of Apocalypse, they've done that multiple times, but she's basically kind of brought in, and then the result is that she's basically been here ever since. Now, originally, she was given the Nega Bands, but more recently, she's in possession of the Quantum Bands. Now, the Quantum Bands traditionally belong to Quasar, right? They originally belonged to Wendell Vaughn, and the idea behind the Quantum Bands is they tap into the Quantum Zone, or the Quantum Realm, whatever you want to call it. That's the reason why during the events of Infinity War and Avengers Endgame and during Ant-Man, when there was all this talk about like the quantum realm and things like that, people were saying, okay, so like now we're going to get the quantum bands. We're going to get Quasar. Like that's where people were getting all that from, because the bands tap into that realm of energy. And essentially the quantum zone as it existed back then, it was essentially a place whereby all matter and energy originated in the formation of the Marvel Universe. That sense changed, but basically it's just an exceedingly powerful source of energy. Now, it doesn't really allow her to like become God. There are limits, and in a lot of ways, the limits are her imagination, but the issue with Phyla-Vell is she's currently learning what it is that she can do with these bands. The reality is that she's basically new to all of this, right? Now, the other part of this is that Phyla-Vell is also accompanied by Moondragon. Now, with the Captain Marvel Volume 5 line of stories, the way this played out is that after Genis-Vell was basically defeated and it all came to an end, this story shifted its focus to Phyla-Vell. It kind of followed, documented her experience and like becoming the new Captain Marvel, or whatever it is, and then ultimately becoming the new Quasar, basically. and kind of undertaking that role and going forward. But during issue number 25, she met Moondragon and the two fell in love. And they've kind of been, they were, up to this point, they were kind of a little bit of a couple. The issue is that you got like that issue and then like Annihilation popped off. So there wasn't really a whole lot of time to explore where this relationship could go. But in the aftermath of Annihilation, that's what they've been doing, is exploring their relationship, figuring out whether or not they work as a couple, different things like that. And they do. And in fact, in the modern era of comics, Moondragon and Phyla-Vell is actually one of the most popular comic book couples that are out there. So what this does is it switches over to Hala, the Kree homeworld. Now, Hala was really like the militaristic empire in Marvel Comics, right? And that's one of the reasons why you started getting things like the War of Kings, right? You get the War of Kings story because the Shi'ar and the Kree were basically like the two military empires that existed out there. You had the Skrulls, but the Skrulls were really kind of like a hodgepodge, ragtag group of people who were dicks, is basically what they were. And so they were barely holding it together. They had their empire, but they weren't nearly on the same kind of militaristic level as the Kree or the Shi'ar, and they weren't nearly as mobilized and organized. But with everything that's gone on, that you essentially have Peter Quill, who's sort of been brought in here. And the reason why this matters is because Peter Quill is in a lot of ways an advisor for the Kree Empire, especially because of his role during the events of Annihilation. Him and Richard Rider were basically running what was left of like the survivors, right? Those planets that hadn't been conquered. It was like the Unified Defensive Front or something like that. But basically, like as the Annihilation wave was making its way across the universe, conquering world after world after world, it was literally just like Peter Quill and Richard Rider just fleeing for their lives and trying to like launch guerrilla warfare tactics, fight where they could when they could, right? So it was like humans versus Skynet is really what it was like with these guys. And so as a result of that, because of the fact that they proved to be successful and because it was really in a lot of ways Peter Quill that kind of helped to keep the whole united front going on with the Kree, he's really kind of considered like an ambassador or an advisor specific of the Kree military bases, kind of been put under Peter Quill insofar that what they're doing is reaching out to the Galadorian Space Knights. Now the Galadorian Space Knights are literally just like robot knights, right? And there are people who can convert themselves into robots, basically kind of artificial intelligence more or less, and then like go forward as kind of like protectors across the universe. What this meant is that given how organized and how structured, and because of the fact that most of the Galadorian Space Knight organization and structure runs on a super enhanced battle net, what the Kree are looking to do is to take that technology and apply it to their own military and apply it to their own sentries, right? Because the sentries are a huge portion of the fighting force, right? The robot sentries of the Kree are a huge portion of the fighting force. They do have their own biological soldiers, right? Their own organisms, their own Kree soldiers, much like we as humans have our own human soldiers. They do have those, but it's much easier to create a whole bunch of sentries and then make them into cannon fodder, right? Just send them out there. For every one sentry soldier that's destroyed, another one's being created. Whereas you can't just like create a member of the Kree race in the span of like an hour or two. You cannot create them that fast. And so because of this, when you have, Richard Rider and Peter Quill kind of talking to each other, that what you end up getting here is the arrival of the Galadorian Space Knights. And when they show up here, of course, Daystar is the one that basically starts talking to everybody and it's kind of like, okay, so let's go ahead, let's get with the system being brought online. And it's really cool because the Galadorian software basically has the ability to enhance the performance of the Kree military surface to, on a geometric rate, right? Basically saying like, we can tie them all together, we can have them all operate almost with a singular consciousness, and they all just sort of go forward and they achieve a certain goal, right? So it's like, if you had 15 people who all had the ability to think the same way, like to think with a singular mind and then function, and perform a particular task, it would be done at a far more efficient rate, right? As opposed to like everybody kind of doing things their own way. And so as a result of that, when the battle system is brought online, everything just sort of, seems to be going exceedingly well. The issue with this is that once the battle net's brought online, you jump over to Phyla-Vell and Moondragon for a second, and they're immediately attacked by a Kree sentry. Now, one thing to understand about the Kree sentries is they do use them as a garrison, right? So like if the Kree show up to a particular planet or a location and they say, okay, this place is of interest, not enough interest for us to like station an entire, platoon here or something like that, but enough for us to leave a couple sentries, to kind of monitor our interest and make sure nobody takes them over, then that's what they'll do. And that's what they did here, right? In this instance where you have Phyla-Vell and Moondragon, there was a Kree sentry being stationed there, and the Kree sentry immediately goes awry and starts attacking everything. From that point, that's exactly where everything starts to fall apart. That what Peter Quill and the various military scientists start to see is incompatibility. They start seeing that essentially something's taking over the entire battle net. And where it's kind of like what the world's going on, like we have to shut it off. Maybe it's some kind of software glitch or something like that. The Galadorian Space Knights are basically saying like, there is no glitch here. This is functioning exactly as intended. We must all join together. We have to eliminate those who will not freely join. Essentially what's happening is the entire Kree military industrial complex is being completely and totally taken over by the Galadorian Space Space Knights. The funny thing about this is the Galadorian Space Knights are not the ones running the show. They're not the ones pulling all the strings. The ones who are pulling all the strings are gonna blow your mind, and I guarantee you, it's not the ones you're gonna see at the end of this video. The reveal that comes with this story was amazing. Like, when you find out what's actually going on here, it was one of the best reveals ever, right? Like, a lot of you guys probably know what happened. Please don't spoil anything. Let's just live in the moment. You guys know how I like to do things. And so as a result of that, of course, with the Kree Sentry being destroyed, it lets off kind of a kind of blinding amount of energy. But what you also have here, what you also kind of have going on are a few things. For Phyla-Vell, you have this kind of disembodied voice that's communicating with her, essentially saying the Kree Empire is going to fall. There's only one being that can save them and everything else in existence. You have to find that savior, right? She kind of gets this disembodied voice appearing to her and telling her this. The other thing is that the Kree, I guess the various Kree sentries begin to kind of meld together. And when I say meld together, I mean like they all, it's not like a Rat King, right? Where they're all just kind of loose, like they're all just kind of connected by their tails and they're just flinging around, all that kind of stuff. No, I mean in the sense that like they start meshing together, right? Like melding together, creating this kind of central spiral. And when the question is like, what's the point of this? A beam is kind of fired out this spire, out into space. When you have Phyla-Vell and you have Moondragon making their way towards the Kree homeworld after being warned by this disembodied voice, and then finding like this cruiser has essentially been cut in half, suddenly this voice starts to pop up again. And this voice starts saying like, only you can save them, only you can protect them, that kind of a thing. You have to go find the savior. You have to find the person. You have to find him. You have to find that individual that's going to save everybody, right? And then she's immediately given cosmic awareness. And this is something that Phyla-Vell did not have before. Now, cosmic awareness, for those of you guys who don't know, is the ability to know everything that's going on in the universe at that particular point in time. When she receives this gift, she passes out, and rightfully so, right? Because it's a huge amount of information being given to someone at one time, and only those individuals who are exceedingly capable of being able to accept it, right? That have some kind of mental conditioning or have some kind of telepathic or some sort of ability that allows them to withstand that full mass of information are able to handle it. Otherwise, it would drive you insane and throw you into a catatonic state. Your brain would literally just overload and shut down, right? It would just be like flipping a switch, right? Tripping a breaker. That's exactly what that would be. And so as a result of that, Phyla-Vell kind of collapses. She doesn't go into a catatonic state. She's going to be fine for the most part. But what you end up also having here is that initially where it seemed like it was the Galadorian Space Knights who were taking over the Sentries, you have Peter Quill here who ends up talking with Ten Core, this one particular woman who he was hitting on, basically, trying to get her between the sheets. And where it's kind of like her and a few of the other Kree soldiers are there as backup. And it's like, okay, like we can band together, we can take this out. Essentially, she and the other Kree have been taken over as well. So this kind of Battle.net software is not just infecting, technological organisms, right? It is like Skynet, but not exactly, right? Skynet only affected like software, right? And then just basically, once it became self-aware, took over like all computer systems and then machinery, developing plants, and then started creating Terminators and things like that. This is an answer to the question, what if Skynet could take over people? And that's exactly what's going on here. They immediately start opening fire on Peter Quill. The guy flees for his life. And then you basically have like all these Kree soldiers who have been taken over by the Battle.net software. You've got the Galadorian Space Knights and all of them saying like, we must be one. We must all join together. There is no singular consciousness anymore. There is only us. There's only the Phalanx. But here's the funny thing about this. As powerful as the Phalanx are, it's kind of like this technological organism that exists to travel from one place to the next, like the Borg from Star Trek, and just conquer the resources and absorb other people into themselves. The Phalanx are not the ones running the show. They're not the ones pulling the strings. They're doing what they're told. Now, who it is that's having them do all this, that's the big reveal. And that's the most awesome part of the story. But with that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.